Critical report into the housing of asylum seekers has been released by a parliamentary committee. In recent years, there's been controversy here in Middlesbrough and in Newcastle over asylum seeker accommodation.
Yes, at the moment, local authorities volunteer to house asylum seekers. And today's report said that dispersal around the country is unfair, with poorer northern areas taking more than others. Jessica Nevin reports.
MD is from Bangladesh. He's been seeking asylum for a year and lives in accommodation in Newcastle. He doesn't want us to use his full name. He says he often lives without essentials like gas and heating.
Last 1 week we don't have any heating in my house. So this is sort of like emergency service which they are supposed to sort out by 24 hours. Who will sort this out? Who will look after this?
A report today from the Home Affairs Select Committee said many asylum seekers are having to live in degrading conditions. And despite MP's previous criticisms, there was little evidence of improvement from the government. It warned that many councils who volunteer to accept asylum seekers may pull out of the scheme. Newcastle City Council says the current distribution system is unfair and places too much of a burden on too few local authorities. It welcomes today's recommendation that councils should be consulted on future contracts. These videos were taken earlier this year in Newcastle by campaigners, angry that some asylum seekers are having to share bedrooms with strangers.
Many people have come from very traumatic situations, and then, the accommodation that they're housed in, they don't get any support, they don't get any privacy, and, it really does have an impact on their mental health and physical health.
G4S, which the government contracts to provide accommodation, said, "We always take complaints very seriously. Our teams are committed to looking after the service users in our care to at least the standards mandated by the Home Office." But nearly 3 years after a controversial mistake meant that asylum seekers' doors in Middlesbrough were all painted red, there are still serious concerns over how some of the most vulnerable in our society are housed. Jessica Nevin, ITV News.
We join our political correspondent Joe Pike at Westminster now. Joe, what's the response been then to this report?
Well, Ian, it would be easy for the report to get lost in a Westminster beset by battles over Brexit as it currently is. But this cross-party committee have been particularly critical, especially over the lack of progress by the government, as Jess mentioned in her report. I've spoken to the Home Office today, who've said we monitor contractors and their accommodation closely and take action, including financial penalties where issues are not addressed within certain timescales. We continue to work closely with local authorities on asylum dispersal and have committed to comprehensive engagement with the Local Government Association and local authority chief executives to review the process.
What about our MPs, Joe? Anything from them?
Well, of course, Ian, this has been a particularly big issue over the past couple of years in Middlesbrough and Stockton. I've spoken to a couple of our Labour MPs in those areas. Firstly, Stockton North's Alex Cunningham, who says this report confirms everything we knew to be true. We are failing to look after some of the most vulnerable people in our society, often leaving them in poor conditions with inadequate support and forcing them to share rooms despite often being victims of torture and other atrocities. Meanwhile, the Middlesbrough MP Andy MacDonald in the Shadow Cabinet, of course, says this system is not fit for purpose. Major change is needed. But with all eyes on Brexit, Ian, will the government make progress, or will we see a similar critical report in 2 years' time?
Joe Pike at Westminster, thank you.
On to other news now, and a teenager has denied murdering